Welcome to our first session of the Ohio Legal Diversity Consortium COVID-19 webinar series. I'm Nirvana Dove, and I am the Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Thompson Hine. And we are pleased to launch this initiative in collaboration with Case Western Reserve University School of Law, Cleveland State University, Cleveland Marshall College of Law, and the University of Akron School of Law. And today we are privileged to be joined by Marla Butler, who's a partner in the business litigation and intellectual property groups at Thompson Hine, and Tarnetta Jones, who's senior counsel in the commercial and public finance group at Thompson Hine. And Marla and Tarnetta have both developed really successful legal careers through a variety of challenges, not the least of which was the 2008-2009 economic recession. And today we have asked them to join us to discuss ways in which law students, recent grads, and junior attorneys can best position themselves for success through the current economic downturn as a result of COVID-19. So Marla and Tarnetta, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to make a note that if any of our participants have questions during today's program, please feel free to share them. You can send them directly to Sabrina Denton, who is listed as our host, and she will share them with the group during our Q&A period. So let's jump right in. Marla, Tarnetta, could you both describe a little bit about your career trajectory, give us a little bit of background? We'll start with Marla.
Sure. So I actually, while I'm in the Atlanta office of Thompson Hine, I actually am from Cleveland and graduated from Cleveland State in 1991. I spent a few years trying to get various aspects of my life together before I figured out that I needed to make sure that I made something of that undergraduate education I had, and started law school at Florida State in 94, finished in 97, and started practicing at another firm in Atlanta, where I spent 22 years at that firm. And as we get into this discussion and got a bit of a preview of some of the questions Nirvana is going to ask, I'll talk a bit more about that experience, but spent 22 years there as a litigator, have always been a litigator. I spent those 22 years between Atlanta, New York, practiced in the same building that I think Tarnetta practiced in at some point at 601 Lex. And then I spent 4 years in Minneapolis before coming back to my favorite city of Atlanta, where I've been since April of last year.
Thank you, Marla. Tarnetta?
Yes, hi. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel, Nirvana. It's great to see everyone who has joined. And before I introduce myself a little bit about my background, I just want to say to everyone to give yourself kudos for showing up today to attend this event. You know, there's a lot going on in the world, in the workplace, to distract you and to occupy, your thoughts. So the fact that you are able to, spend some time with us, to advance your careers and just gain maybe some nuggets of knowledge, you should definitely take pride in making that time for yourself. But my career trajectory as a lawyer is a little bit non-traditional in that I'm from North Carolina. When I finished undergrad, I pursued a career in sales and consulting. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years before I went to law school at Georgetown. And I think probably because I had that work experience, I knew when I did my first summer associate internship that I was leaning more towards a transactional practice as opposed to being a litigator, which is really back in my day in law school, that's really all they really taught you in law school. But I knew that something more along the lines of transactional work was what I wanted to pursue. I moved to New York after attending law school at Georgetown and joined a firm on Wall Street doing finance work, working with really large institutional lenders. I've been to a couple of firms before joining Thompson Hine just over a year ago. In addition, I took a step away from private practice and started my own consulting firm to work with entrepreneurs and startups and to advise, develop some relationships that I had created during my tenure in private practice. And I also have some experience working at in-house banks. So just a little bit of a lot of different things that Marla has done, but those things have landed me at Thompson Hine, where I'm really happy to be part of the firm and the practice here. and I'm in the New York office.
So as you all can tell, we have the two best people to talk about this topic because they've got such varied experience. So Marla and Tarnetta, and you can jump in. Can you outline from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that underrepresented law students and recent grads and junior attorneys specifically face during challenging economic times in the legal market? Tarnetta, go ahead.
Okay, well, it's maybe because I'm more junior and I'm more recent. So I was a second year in 2000, 2008, 2000, I guess 2009 is when the September 15, 2008 is when it happened, and then 2009 is when the layoff occurred. And out of my my class of, I think there were about 66 people in my class at my large firm. I believe 40 or so were laid off during that time. And fortunately, I was not. And many factors to contribute to that, but I feel like there's a lot of really uncertainty that's kind of at the forefront of everyone's mind. If you have employment, or if you're searching for employment, there's really so many things that are out of your control. So I think it's natural to feel anxious and to feel worried and to feel concerned. And what's really going to help you through this time is to take advantage of resources such as this, and to take advantage of relationships that you have with mentors and peers who can help steer you through. And hopefully there will be some concrete things that we can talk to you about during this session that will help you feel more secure and lessen the anxiety. But really, it's a process of time. I don't think there are any miracles to get through this. But just know that if you're meant to do great things, or if you're meant to be a great lawyer, then that will still happen, recession or not.
And I think, one of the unique things about the current recession is that it's accompanied by, quarantining at one level or another, depending on where you are. And that presents even more challenges, right? So, you've got the recession itself, where, at least for some groups of lawyers, work is slowing down, and you've got law firms who are pulling back on hiring. And so, it's already been hard for you to, make it through through undergrad, do well enough to get into law school, and do well enough to position yourself for a job. But now there are fewer jobs that you are competing for. So there's that factor, which I think, whether it's the 2008 recession or now, that is going to be the same. And so that's one difficulty. But then you add this, the coronavirus situation on top of it. And now you have a situation where you're not really being seen, right? Because you're not, if you're trying to get a job, you're not going to events where you can meet people and kind of show off your, shining personality, right? You're not, if you're a young lawyer that's already practicing, you're not in a situation, most likely, where you're in the office and you are seeing people face to face, and that presents challenges of its own. One of the pieces of advice that I have given to young lawyers over the years, is to not stay in your office, right? I've seen so many young lawyers, and for reasons that I think I understand, lawyers of color in particular spend too much time in their offices with their door closed, right? And not kind of being out there and part of the law firm community. And that's what we have. Even if you want to be out there in the law firm community, it's hard now because everybody's working from home, and so you're not seen. So I think that's another challenge. And I think another challenge of this recession is that everybody's struggling, right? I mean, so if you are a young lawyer that's new to the practice, you're working with more senior lawyers who might be parents, who are juggling, not only their careers, but they're trying to manage how the heck they're going to get their kids through virtual school. And all of the challenges, the personal challenges that everybody is experiencing, means that they're experiencing it too. And that partner that may have had time, for example, to mentor you, maybe doesn't have that time or energy now. So those I think are a few examples of how a recession in general can have an impact and make things more difficult. But the nature of this one in particular just adds kind of layers of difficulty to what we had in 2008.
So Marla, since I have you already off mute, and you've mentioned 2008, can you tell us a little bit about that experience? You were a bit more established in your career than Tarnetta was, and we'll get Tarnetta's perspective. But what were some of the things that you experienced and some of the things that you saw junior attorneys doing to effectively navigate during that time? And alternatively, some of the pitfalls that you observed?
Yeah. So, the question is kind of what happened with everything that was going in 2008. What was my experience? What were the pitfalls? And I'm gonna generally answer your question by sharing a story that I spent many years not telling, and then I realized over the years that it was an important story to tell because I'm a believer in silver linings. Okay, and some aspects of 2008 were presented silver linings for me. So I mentioned that I was at a litigation firm, and just like all firms, the firm was struggling. And the firm had taken on a case that it probably never should have taken on. But it was a case that ended up going to trial, and the firm was handling this case on a contingency fee basis. And it was a case that we knew going into trial that we were going to lose, and we couldn't talk our client into settling, right? So we went to trial on this loser case. And the only reason this happened was because of the recession. There was not like better work out there to fill the plates of lawyers. So this happens at law firms sometimes during recessions, is people's plates get filled with work that's not the best work, that's not the most profitable. And this was one of those situations. So I'm on this crappy case that's going to trial that I knew going in that we were going to lose. And I had tried cases before, but I had never lost a case at trial. I had cases that settled, like before closing, and I won cases, but I never just flat out had a jury verdict go against me at trial. So we go, and this is in 2008, we go to trial and we lost. And I was devastated for weeks, right? And now it feels silly that I was devastated for weeks. The client knew we were going to lose the trial. I should have just been like, I told you we were going to lose the trial, but I was devastated for weeks. I took it very personally. But what came out of that was, because we still put everything into it, and what came out of it was the opposing lawyers had a relationship because they did work for this big company. And they were kind of bragging about having won this trial against my firm to one of the lawyers at this big company. But they mentioned me and the fact that they thought they were going to lose the trial because of my trial performance. And, this was what kind of came through between the lines. They were really kind of bragging about having beaten us. But what that did was have that in-house lawyer at this big company reach out to me. And I have built a book of business largely on that from that company's work. And the reason I tell the story is that 2008 and the couple of years that followed were just awful. And the work was awful. And we were doing crappy work and we weren't getting paid for a lot of it, right? But we still went to trial. We did our best. We performed as well as we could under the circumstances. And at the end of the day, it paid dividends, right? So this is investment time for you, right? If your plate is thin, this is investment time. You do the very best you can now, and it will pay off down the road.
Thank you, Marla. Tarnetta, can you share a little bit about your experience as a more junior associate at that time?
Sure. So I alluded to this a little bit before, reasons why I wasn't laid off. I think that so there was a unique experience that in my practice area in the firm that I was in, a colleague and I, we felt for reasons that were obvious to us that we weren't getting the same opportunities that our peers had been receiving in terms of training, mentoring, and this is pre-recession. And because we first of all, because we had each other to gut check and share our experiences with, but also because we were committed to being good lawyers, and we were committed to advocating for ourselves. Probably about a month or 2 weeks after the recession happened, but before the layoffs happened, we actually requested a meeting with the head of our practice group to talk to him about our experience. And it wasn't a gripe session, it was an opportunity to present solutions for what we thought would be able to enable us to become more integrated in the group. And to read between the lines, my colleague was another Black woman, and we felt that we were getting opportunities because of relationships that were being formed with people who weren't Black in our group. And so we sat down with our head and we actually wrote a memo, and just said, these are things we've seen. And we didn't say it was about race or anything like that, but we said we would like to have the same opportunities that some of our peers are having. And we volunteered to write articles. We volunteered to write, to work on research projects. We volunteered to do X, Y, and Z. And believe it or not, the next week, layoffs came down in the firm. And, junior lawyer, law student, random guy on the street, do you think that you can, if you have carte blanche to lay off attorneys in your group, you're going to lay off 2 Black women who just came to you and said they feel like they're being treated differently? But so the point of the story is that we advocated for ourselves, and we presented solutions. And I think there was a real reckoning and consideration of our commitment to the firm, because when people are looking at making changes, they're looking at who's busy doing work, who's doing good work, who's really committed to the organization. And I think because we went to our leadership, having identified an issue and also identifying solutions to combat, we were seen as committed to the organization. So I think that it's something to go through this process and through your careers to advocate for yourself and what you want to accomplish in your career, as you're learning, and just through your time as an advocate for others.
Tarnetta, since I've got you off of mute, did you have any mentors or folks that were giving you advice during that time of your career? And what was some of the best advice you received?
Right. I'm fortunate to have had mentors all throughout my career, because I seek them out, and I don't necessarily can point to any a specific bit of advice, but really is to seek out opinions from several different people and to be open to words of advice that you're not looking for, and to be introspective and really take a good look at yourself, because obviously you have a viewpoint of what your experience is and how you think maybe things should be, how you think things should go and should be addressed. And you really have to trust the process and trust differing opinions. You talk about mentors during the recession and specific advice that they gave me. I have mentors now, and one of which is on this call. Marla is a great mentor to me, and I recall a specific incident recent pre-COVID where I reached out to her for advice, and she did not tell me what I wanted to hear, but she told me what I needed to hear, and I'm very grateful for that. So I think that in terms of any mentor relationship you have, whether it's during a challenging time at work or during a boom time at work, to really be thoughtful and know that if you're going to someone for advice, or even if someone has pulled you aside and offered you some unsolicited insight, to really have regard for what the time that person has taken to invest in you and give you that advice, because I think you may be surprised at how people really want you to succeed. And from your viewpoint as a junior, you really have you have such a limited view of why decisions are being made. You're not in tune to all the decision points, and there's a lot of things that you don't know that go into evaluating a circumstance, and just to really be open to hearing things that you may not want to hear, and trust that people do have your best interests in mind.
So for me, and I thought about that question, I don't know that I've gotten a lot of advice over the years, in part because, to the extent I had mentors, they were purely professional mentors in the sense that it was usually an older white man. And to the extent he was mentoring me on the practice of law. But I haven't had people who I could go to with one instance on one occasion that I can think of. So other than that, one instance, one occasion, I haven't had people who I could go to for advice about being who I am in a law firm environment. And so I think in place of that, what I did, and sometimes you'll go through your career, and if you had asked me 5 years ago, did I do this? It probably wouldn't have even occurred to me, but you kind of reflect. And I think what I did a lot was observe. And what I mean by that was if I see someone succeeding, I was observing what they were doing to succeed. And seeing if there's some aspect of that fits me that I can do, right? And that qualification is important because you can't just do what other people do that are succeeding if it doesn't work for you, if it's not you, if it's not something that you're comfortable with. But so I was observant as to what people were doing that were succeeding, and I was also very observant about the environment, right? So I think so much of success in a law firm, and I've had conversations with people where I've put like percentages of it. I think like 40% of success in a law firm is you being a really good lawyer. And like 60% is you operating successfully in that environment, right? I mean, and so we don't have many mentors that help us with that 60%. And if they're not there, because I think at my last law firm, the whole time I was there, there was one other Black woman partner, and I think she was only there for 2 years while I was there. So there was nobody that I was going to for that kind of advice. And so we have to be able to walk into an environment and pick up on the unspoken, unwritten rules, right? On the social cues, and figure out like how to operate in that environment in a way that balances our own personal dignity and needs, right? Because that has to survive, and also works in that professional environment. So, Tarnetta has had mentors along the way, and that is fantastic. To the extent you are in an environment where you don't have those mentors, you have to observe. You're not going to have somebody that's there that's going to tell you that you're acting in a certain way. And I don't know if anybody has watched the show Insecure, but that scene where Molly is, if you haven't watched it, please do watch it because it's so good. But there's a scene, so Molly is one of the main characters, and she's a lawyer in a majority white law firm. And this younger Black woman comes to the law firm, and she is like she's kind of off the chain, right? And Molly is struggling with trying to figure out, like, basically how to tell her, like, you can't act like that here, but then feeling bad that she has to tell her that she's not. But at least, you know, that young lawyer had Molly, right? Somebody like Molly to at least have that conversation so that she understands the ramifications of whatever behavior it is. So, but if you don't have it, if you don't have that person around, you have to be extraordinarily observant, and figure out how you can function within the environment as it exists.
Marla, I love, please, Tarnetta, go ahead.
Can I just add, I think it's very telling, you know, that Marla talks about not having mentors, and I had some, but I think that's really a reflection of how the practice has changed or has not changed, that you may have available to you more mentors than we had available to us just by the nature of who was working in firms. And when you think about a relationship with a mentor, you should be expansive in who might be able to fill that role for you. It doesn't have to be someone in your firm. It can be someone who you meet well, pre-COVID at an event, or someone you see speaking at on a webinar. You can reach out to someone. You can reach out to an alum from your law school or even from your undergrad. There are lots of an affinity group. There are lots of people who are happy to serve that role for you because they because they realize how they would have benefited by having someone mentor them. So just don't be limited in where you look to mentorship advice.
Yeah, one of the takeaways that I get from what both of you have said is, you know, being open to that feedback as well and open to those relationships and being willing to hear the advice, even if it's not the advice that you necessarily want to have. We'll do a whole session on making the most of mentoring relationships, but Tarnetta, if you could touch on some of the things that have made those relationships successful. And I'll start with, you know, one, and that I'll ask you is, you know, did you go into those relationships with a particular goal in mind? Because often, you know, approaching a mentor with exactly how they can help you can be helpful to the mentor.
All right. So I'll say absolutely not, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I've been a great mentee either. So I think that you know, having a goal in mind really is good, but you know, we talked about being open to the relationships and being open to the advice. That really is key because, you know, how can someone really help you if they don't know what you need? And that's one thing for me to be an outside observing you and being able to identify some things that I think you can work on. But it's another thing for you to come to me or come to a mentor and say, you know, I'm not sure how to navigate, you know, this scenario or how to approach, you know, this type of, you know, work assignment. But for you to really, I think it's a really good thought to think about what you want out of that relationship. But what's really important is that you find in a mentor someone who you can be that you can be fairly transparent with. You know, it's that really kind of gets to the heart of what you're trying to accomplish from the relationship and how that person can help you. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and really admit to some shortcomings that you have, or even if it's simple as to know, like, I don't know what I don't know and that I should know. But to, in a sense, be vulnerable so that you can get the help that you need. And I'll say for me, one challenge that I've had, you know, through my career is, you know, everyone, you know, who's on this call, you know, you're an achiever. We've all been achievers. That's why we're here. So it can be tough to ask for help. That is a personal, you know, challenge of mine, to ask for help. And just know that people really are open. They expect you're a lawyer because things are hard. Like, you've accomplished what you've accomplished. You have this degree. You're working on this degree. You passed this bar exam. You represent a small percentage of the population who has done that, because this is hard work. So you should give yourself some grace also in thinking about the things that you want to seek out from a mentor, as far as moving forward with your practice, your practical knowledge, and also the so many subjective things that we endure in the practice of law.
Marla, did you have anything to add before I move to the next question?
Only just an observation that I think as a mentor, I can be a hard mentor, right? In that I will give really honest feedback, and I will, for somebody that I am mentoring, I'm probably harder on them than I am on other people, and in part it's because it's a reality when it's not just a cliche that we have to work harder to survive in law firm environments. It's a fact. I mean, it is, right? Because there are, and it's not even an intentional thing on the part of law firms. But, we don't necessarily gel socially. And so there's going to be, a kind of a less automatic willingness to put us on teams. And there's the implicit biases that will have people looking at our work differently than they would look at somebody else's work. So it just is that we have to work harder and we have to be better. And I think, because of that, you want a mentor that is not going to just tell you what you want and kind of build up your self-esteem, because you will be, a person with a really high self-esteem and unemployed. Okay. So, you want to work with somebody who is going to call you on whatever you need to do to get better. And then you go find somebody else. You find your girlfriend, your buddy, whatever, to boost your self-esteem. I don't think that's solely what you should be looking to mentors for. You want to, if it's a mentor and it's a professional mentor in a professional environment, you want a mentor that's going to help you improve professionally. And that's only going to be someone that's going to tell you like it is.
So speaking of advice, what specific advice would both of you give junior associates who are trying to build their practice, especially in this time where work might be slower? They might not have as much opportunity to work on the good work, that might be the crappy work that's around right now, or a lot less of it.
So I think part of it is, and this applies now especially, but it applies always. And I think one piece of advice that I'd give would be throughout your career to give people the benefit of the doubt. And what I mean by that is you will have many, many instances in your career where you will hear a comment and think, what did that mean? Or someone, an associate down the hall will get an assignment, a big assignment, juicy work, and you think, I wonder why that didn't come to me, right? We can spend a lot of time and emotional energy on that kind of thing. And I think that we have to be very selective in what we spend our emotional energy on. So there are certainly times when things may happen in your career where you need to address them. Absolutely. But just be thoughtful and selective about it, and have your tendency be, I guess I would encourage you to have your tendency be to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe that happened for a legitimate reason. And you might be completely wrong, but you're not giving people the benefit of the doubt for them. You're giving people the benefit of the doubt for you, right? Because while you are spending all that emotional energy trying to figure out what somebody's intentions were, your colleague next door is working, is, billing time, and is working up a really good memo that's going to get him another assignment down the road. So I think that's the biggest piece of advice is certainly, there are times when you need to bring people's attention to things, but be really selective about when you do it, and have your kind of tendency be to just let it roll off your back and keep moving, and kind of focusing on being a better lawyer.
Tarnetta, what about you?
Wait, I was so mesmerized by the answer. Can you refresh the question, please?
Sure. What advice would you give a junior attorney who is looking to continue to build a practice even during this crisis time where work might be slow or might not be available or might be the crappy work instead of the work that really helps move their career forward?
All right. Okay. So this seems so silly, but attitude just means so much. Having a positive attitude and having the people having their interactions with you be positive, it just means so much. So I would think that each time you have a chance to interact with someone, whether it's in person, whether it's via email, whether it's on a webinar, to exude enthusiasm. And if you're getting a crappy assignment, to exude enthusiasm. If you're emailed at 7 p.m. on a Friday, to exude enthusiasm. That really goes a long way. It seems ridiculous, but responding to an email, happy to help, like it really can distinguish you from your peers. And it really can open up opportunities for people to want to be engaged with you, because that's really what it's about, right? Getting good work, getting good work is someone engaging with you. So you can imagine how someone is more inclined to engage with someone who is pleasant as opposed to someone who isn't. And that doesn't mean, and that's really that doesn't mean that you're immune to what's happening in the world, or that you can't have a bad day, but really in these times, just to be pleasant. And then I think another thing that may seem obvious is to take care with your work product. It's everyone makes mistakes, but they should be few and far between. You should do your best to clarify instructions on an assignment. If you have a week to turn something in, like do a gut check, like after 2 days, check in with the person who gave you the assignment to make sure you're on track. Communicate enthusiastically, definitely, you're not looking for someone to hold your hand or to guide you. I think by asking questions to confirm you're on the right track, that also shows enthusiasm. And know that if there's crappy work to be done, if you weren't doing it, somebody else would be doing it. So work is work, and do it with a smile.
Thank you, Tarnetta.
Can
Marla,
I?
did you have something to add? Please.
Just because I agree so wholeheartedly with what Tarnetta just said on both pieces. The kind of being a person that people want to be around is important, and on the quality piece, I tend to tell young lawyers that I'm working with, I want you to want to win this case as much as I want to win this case, right? So when you have an assignment, I want it to be, you're not just, you got a checklist. You can just finish this and check it and move to the next thing. I want your heart to be in it. And when your heart is in it, that's when you do the kind of job that Tarnetta just described, where the mistakes are few and far between, where you take it seriously and you don't view it as, if somebody, if I made a mistake, somebody in the 4 people above me in the chain, before it gets to the client, somebody will catch it. Not the right attitude, because what that does is it puts more work on the plates of people who are those 4 levels between you and the client. And when you are operating high quality work, relatively mistake free, then all of a sudden, you're that second or third kind of person, and you're kind of rising up in that. But I just agree wholeheartedly, quality of work and being a person that people want to work with.
Yeah, and can I add additionally to that? Marla mentioned really owning the work. I think that's something, well, I definitely, when I was a junior attorney, it was definitely something lost on me, like what my actual role was. If I'm doing this, this specific task, I didn't really have an understanding of how it fit into the whole deal. And that's because, I mean, many lawyers don't take the time to explain that to you. And so if you may still be working with people who don't explain that to you, but understand that the work that you're being assigned, it is integral to the success of the client relationship. And you need to own that. And to the extent you can, take time to look into resources to figure out how does this fit into the big picture. That may not be billable time. That may, just be like a Google search of the company, or of a part of just something that you're asked to look up or to research to understand how it works. But as I supervise junior attorneys, people who take ownership of the assignments, those people are integral to me, and those people, like, I sing their praises and I go back to them over and over again because they are servicing me, the client, the way that I'm servicing my external client, and as a team we're winning together. So just know that what you're being given, it may seem nuanced, it may not make sense to you, but it really is important to your internal client, the senior attorney or a partner who's giving you the assignment, and also as an end result to the client. Just know your value in the team and what you're doing.
Thank you both. So I just want to make a note. We will have a question and answer period. So if you have questions, please don't forget to send them to Sabrina. So we also have some law students on the call today, Marla and Tarnetta. What advice would you give law students or recent grads who are looking to launch their careers in this time where many legal employers have cut back on hiring?
Yeah, it's a tough question. It is. I mean, I think, the piece of advice that I can just think of and give now is, because the hiring is being cut back to the extent that it is, there are fewer jobs out there that are kind of the job that you hope to get when you went to law school and as you were approaching graduation. So you might not get that job that you had in mind, even though it's a job that, but for the recession, you likely would have gotten. I think to think about using this time to find a job and do the kind of work that has your bigger goal in mind, right? So, you might not have that dream job right now, straight out of law school, but when you are looking for, your next best job, be thoughtful about it and find something that's going to give you the skills that you can sell 2 years, 3 years down the road when things are opening back up to get into that dream job. And that could be easier said than done. And, at some point, you might get to a point where you just need a job, and I get that. But to the extent you can find a role that's going to just be a stepping stone to the job that you want anyway, just be thoughtful about it.
My advice, Marla kind of threw me when she said 2 to 3 years. My advice is going to be to stay positive. Stay positive. You have to just believe in yourself, and you have to be your own hype man, and to be creative and reaching out to people. Be persistent. Now, here's a little bit of advice. I just received an email from someone who went to my law school and my undergrad, and reaching out, to ask for advice or whatever. And I'm like, cool, but like, I'm doing other things. I've received, I don't know that I've received any of those emails where the person has emailed me again to follow up when I haven't responded. Be persistent. There's no harm in asking someone, hey, like, I sent you this email, a few weeks ago, just wanted to follow up. You have, a few minutes to chat. Be persistent. You can be persistent and not be a pain. And just because I haven't responded, just because I'm not responding this week doesn't mean I'm not interested in having the conversation. So you're putting yourself out there, you're being positive, you're putting yourself out there. You're being in a space with positive people, and it's not about toxic positivity, but just really just what can I be grateful for today? Like I've accomplished all this. I'm going to accomplish more, to keep your head in the game. But and hopefully it won't take 2 to 3 years. But Marla has forewarned you that it may. But your mindset really does play a huge role in reaching out to people, and keeping yourself hyped up, and knowing that this is a career path that you've chosen, and it's going to work out for you. So be positive, be creative, be persistent.
So both of, oh, go ahead, please,
the 2 to
Marla.
3 years comes from, I think, if you're going to start a job now, getting 2 to 3 years of solid experience before you move is a good. That's where that comes from. But one other piece that I will add to that, because one thing Tarnetta wove in there was reaching out to people. So I can think of 2 people in the last 8 or so years who were relatively recent law school grads, were not in the job that they wanted to be, but they reached out to me. One, this happened in New York, and the next time it happened in Minneapolis, because we were both FSU. I went to Florida State for law school. We were Florida State law school grads. So it's like they just went and figured out, in New York, the Florida State law school alum, and reached out to me. And it took about a year, but when this happened in New York, he's still at my last firm. I brought, after getting to know him, after a period of time, something opened up, and I said he'd be perfect for it. And he's still in going through the ranks at my last firm. Happened when I was in Minneapolis, Florida State law school grad. He had graduated. He was a Florida State undergrad, as a matter of fact, and he had graduated from the University of Minnesota. Did not get a law firm job. His grades weren't the best, but was working at Thomson Reuters, which is based in Minneapolis. Reached out to me, Florida State alum. We got to know each other. He's still at my last firm, right? I brought him in. So figure out your networks. And, while I got together with these 2 in person, yeah, do a WebEx with one-on-one with someone that you are trying to get to know. And it might take a year, it might take 2 years, and it might take 20 people that you need to know like this, but build your network. Building your network now will not only potentially help you get a job, but once you get a job and it's a few years down the road and you're trying to build a book of business, that same network is going to help you build that book.
So another question, you both have identified a variety of skills or traits that you've developed over the course of your careers, from being positive to honing your legal skills to ensure that you're providing top-notch work at all times, and among other things. How has the development of those skills or traits or other characteristics impacted or helped shape your professional brand?
So that's a tough question for me. So I'm going to let Tarnetta go first.
That is so not cool. Yeah,
I gave you the questions in advance.
I know, but still, it's like, oh, we'll skip over that one. I think there's something to be said. Your brand, really, it's a representation of your authentic self. And I think, well, there's a follow-up question that she gave us beforehand and talked about mistakes too,
Yes.
with in the same vein. So I think that for me, it's really about evolving as an individual, not just as a lawyer or as a person in a corporate environment. So your brand should reflect you authentically, and it should be appropriate to the environment that you're in. And so I think my brand, I'm a lawyer with a personality, so maybe that's come across here, maybe it hasn't. But that's really kind of how I build myself, but really, to get to that nuance aspect of it, you have to be a good lawyer. And for me, asking questions like, I'd be given an assignment and I'd spend all this time like trying to figure it out. Then I turn in something and they're like, well, what'd you turn in? Because I wasn't comfortable asking questions. I wasn't comfortable acknowledging what I didn't know. And I spoke, before about we're all achievers and we're used to, having all the answers and knowing how to do things. Being a lawyer, it's a training process. You learn by doing. So by asking these questions and starting to figure out what I didn't know and when to start asking these questions, that develops my objective skill set. So understanding things, and you'd be amazed at how much you know just from the fact that you've done things no one else has done. So you may not know a lot amongst this group of people, but you probably know a whole lot amongst a whole nother random group of people. So as you're doing, you are learning, and your skill set is part of your brand, and just being authentic to yourself is part of that too. So the mistakes were still like not knowing when to ask for help. And now I know when to ask for help. I still don't want to ask for help, but you just got to get over it. You got to ask for the help.
So something Tarnetta said just triggered something for me. I mean, I think the one kind of trait of mine is that I can be kind of hyper self-aware, right, of how I'm perceived in different environments. And, sometimes that's been a mistake because it can be exhausting, right? But at the same time, I think that it has helped me to work in a professional environment that, 23 years ago was very unfamiliar. Because if I am very aware of how I am being perceived by others, then I can make a judgment call about whether I want to change something or not. Right? I mean, that's, there's always the or not, but you want it to be your choice. You never, I think the worst thing is to be in an environment where you're making mistakes and you have no idea you're making a mistake. And it's not like a mistake that you're making because it's one of your core values or something. You're just making mistakes. And if somebody just told you, then you'd stop making that mistake. But people don't tell us when we're making mistakes very often. They don't, right? They don't, because they're afraid to tell us. If, Tarnetta's a Black woman, I'm a Black woman. And some 65-year-old white dude comes and tells me that I'm making a mistake. He thinks I might appreciate it, but he thinks that he might offend me. So that's how that works in law firms. So people don't tell you when you're making a mistake. So you've got to figure it out for yourself. And being, somewhat hyper aware of how you're being perceived, I think can help you figure out how to not make the mistakes that you don't want to make anyway.
Thank you, Marla. I want to open up to our participants for questions, and I have one that's come in, so I'll read that one and then I'll open it up for anyone else that has questions that they'd like to share. So the question that we received is, how do you both garner building your book of business? Law school doesn't really teach you that part, and just because someone likes you doesn't mean they will give you work. So how do you make that transition?
Yeah. So one advantage that you have now coming out of law school is that you have an awareness that you need to build a book of business, right? When I came out of law school in 1997, and maybe Tarnetta, when you came out too, what year?
2008.
2007.
2007.
Okay, so you were just on that cusp. That's right, when things changed. Building a book of business was the farthest thing from my mind. I was just going to be this, this highbrow profession, and I was going to be a lawyer, and I was going to write excellent briefs and that kind of thing. So whoever asked the question, you are ahead of the game by knowing that you need to build a book of business ultimately. So it goes back to the network that I referred to. Another thing, and this is kind of related to the network, is, when I came out of law school, there was like my professional life over here, and there was my personal life over here. And they were very separate things, right? I mean, I didn't want these people knowing these people. I didn't want these people knowing these people generally. And as my career progressed, they got closer and closer until they actually merged to a large degree. There are certainly plenty of people that are in one world or the other, but I've got a lot of people that cross over. And that is important because those people that are in the middle, like those people are my network. And these are people who are, you know, going, they might start out in a law firm, but they have ended up in-house, right? I spent most of my time today working on a case for someone that I knew that was in a law firm environment now and is now in-house and sending work. So building that network and not being afraid for those people that are in that crossover space to say, you know, don't forget what I do. And if you have an opportunity to send me some work, I'd appreciate it. Or, and this is the last piece, when you're a young lawyer, you can't, you know, you're not going to be able to go out and get a, you know, if you're a litigator, because that's all I know, you know, you're not going to be able to go out and get some big piece of federal court litigation by yourself because you're not that experienced. But what you can do is know what your firm is capable of. And you can sell your firm and you can sell the lawyers that are more senior than you. And think about it this way. Imagine you have a friend, say you're a third or a fourth year lawyer, and you have a friend that's been out of law school 5 or 6 years and they just went in-house, right? And you talk to that friend and you figure out what kind of work can my firm do for your company. And then when they tell you, you go down the hall and you find the very good senior lawyer that does that kind of work. And you say, I want to introduce you to somebody at this company. I mean, think about what that is doing for you as a young lawyer, where you are finding some, you know, 30-year out lawyer down the hall and saying, let me introduce you to somebody that might be a firm client. So just kind of build your network and use it.
So my response to that is be kind and don't be a dick. Like, that's really, just be a decent human being, because
We'll edit that out.
Your classmates now are completely, they're sources of referrals, they're referral sources. They're people, if you're in a law firm, people who are in your first year class, your second class, those people are going to be referral sources. I had a couple weekends ago, I was on a Zoom with the Balsa from my law school, and I believe out of people who signed, who were able to make it, out of like 20 people, I believe I'm the only person in a law firm, the only person who's still in a law firm. So you know, I'm out in the city having dinner on the sidewalk. I see this guy, Roy. Hey, Roy. He used to work with me at another firm. He also went to my law school with the class under me. I'm like, Roy, I gotta call you, like, to get some business. He's like, yeah, Tarnetta gave me a call. You know, like, there are people who are going to be in a position to give you business are people. They are people who are going to remember you being kind to them. There are people going to remember you being kind to other people. I mean, that's a big part of it. And for me, my business development group and my social group, there's a lot of interaction crossover between those groups. And when you're talking about being a lawyer, provide the services that we provide, it's a commodity. People want to work with people they like. So that's going to help you develop these relationships down the line. Just be kind.
Well, Marla and Tarnetta, we have 2 minutes left, so I just want to say thank you so much for your time. This was terrific. I know that everyone got a lot out of it. To all of our participants, thank you for coming today. This was our inaugural event, and we have quite a few additional webinars and other programming that we are rolling out through the Ohio Legal Diversity Consortium. I included in the chat a link to our website. And so please stay abreast there. On September 9th, we will have our next session, which will be on virtual job searching. We'll be adding a session about making the most of mentoring relationships and how to develop those relationships. And something that's also not on the website is that we are going to be offering a series of mock interviews in the coming months. And so check back. There will be a lot of resources for you here, and stay in touch with us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Marla and Tarnetta.
Thanks, everyone. Yep, glad to do it. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.